Frank Fritz's friend shares big funeral plans after American Pickers star died peacefully with Mike Wolfe by his side. Frank's guardian and close friend, Chris Davis, exclusively revealed to the U.S. Sun funeral plans for the late History Channel star. There will be a celebration of life in the future. It will be big. Fans can attend. We already have several bands who want to play in it, including my band. This will probably take place in the spring. Chris added of his close friend, "I will say Frank loved his fans, and he passed away peacefully with friends at his side." Mike broke the news of the passing on Tuesday morning, as he captioned a sweet throwback with his pal. "It's with a broken heart that I share with all of you that Frank passed away last night. I've known Frank for more than half my life, and what you've seen on TV has always been what I have seen. A dreamer who was just as sensitive as he was funny. The same off-camera as he was on, Frank had a way of reaching the hearts of so many by just being himself. Who would have ever dreamed we would share the cockpit of a white cargo van in front of millions of people interested in our adventures? Before the show, we would take off together to places we never knew existed with no destination in mind, and just the shared passion to discover something interesting and historic." The passing comes 2 years after Frank suffered a stroke in his Iowa home in July 2022. Frank was, unfortunately, unable to recover from the stroke, as he was rushed to the hospital 4 times in 2022 and 2023 for pneumonia and a seizure. Frank's close friends even filed for a conservatorship and guardianship for him in August 2022. Midwestone Bank acted as Frank's conservator, while his close friend Chris Davis served as his guardian. Because of his stroke, Mr. Fritz's decision-making capacity is so impaired that he is unable to care for his own safety or to provide for necessities such as food, shelter, clothing, or medical care, without which physical injury or illness may occur. Documents obtained by the U.S. Sun read, "Mr. Fritz's decision-making capacity is so impaired that he is unable to make, communicate, or carry out important decisions concerning his own financial affairs. Decisions must be made for Mr. Fritz's care and placement while he continues to recover and receive treatment for his injuries. The appointment of a guardian and conservator was deemed necessary to avoid immediate harm to him. The guardian's role was to help Frank with his Crohn's disease treatment, bring him to physical therapy, and help him shop for groceries and cook." In July, Midwestone demanded Frank's finances be transferred to them, as the star needed skilled and long-term nursing care at the time. Frank was wheelchair-bound after suffering the stroke, as a ramp was installed outside of his Iowa farm home. He can walk, but he's always going to need the wheelchair because he can't walk long distances, a source previously told the U.S. Sun. Basically, you lose motion. He lost motion. A stroke can affect your left or your right side. It affected his right side. Frank's final episode was in March 2020. He left the show to recover from back surgery that left him with 185 stitches and 2 rods in his spine. During his time off, Frank lost 65 pounds and was living a healthier lifestyle, including being sober from alcohol. He had been open about wanting to return to the series after his hiatus, but was officially let go in 2021, Mike confirmed. "I will miss Frank, just like all of you, and I pray for the very best and all good things for him on the next part of his journey," Mike said at the time. The two had a falling out, as Frank exclusively told the U.S. Sun in a 2021 interview, "I haven't talked to Mike in 2 years. He knew my back was messed up, but he didn't call me up and ask how I was doing. That's just how it is. I think Mike wants to get his brother Robbie in there to replace me. I don't know why he's behaving like that towards me." The two reconciled after Frank suffered the stroke. Frank's co-star Danielle Colby paid tribute with a series of photos. She wrote, "Frank, I will miss your ability to make everyone laugh, your love for talking tattoos, your epic collections, but what I will miss the most are those little glimpses of vulnerability from time to time. Frank, you loved your cat and your mama, and we bonded on those things. You will be missed for all of these reasons and so many more. Rest in peace, Road Dog." Robbie Wolf, who replaced Frank on American Pickers, shared, "It's with a heavy heart I'm sad to say my friend Frank Fritz has passed away last night. You all knew him from TV, but I knew him from traveling, fishing, and family. He was the godfather to my twin girls. His smile was contagious, and his laughter will be missed. Most of all, just time sitting in a fishing boat talking about life. I know you're in a better place. Love you, buddy. Hope you catch the big one. Until we see each other in heaven, hold the boat steady." Frank appeared on American Pickers from 2010 to 2020. The sun dipped low over the Iowa landscape, casting long shadows across the rolling fields. It was a quiet, peaceful scene, fitting for the somber occasion that had brought people together to mourn the loss of Frank Fritz. The news of the American Pickers star's passing had spread like wildfire, stunning fans and colleagues alike. Frank had touched countless lives, not just through his love of antiques, but through his infectious enthusiasm for the stories behind the forgotten treasures of America's heartland. Now his life was being celebrated with funeral plans as unique as the man himself. Frank's best friend, Jason Thurman, stood at the edge of the small family plot, looking out over the gathering crowd. His thoughts drifted to the man he'd known for over 2 decades. Frank had been more than just a TV personality. He was a kind, genuine soul who had an unmatched passion for history and the thrill of the hunt. Jason had been there during Frank's highs and lows, from the rise of American Pickers to the quiet battles Frank faced behind the scenes. In the last few years after his stroke, Frank had leaned on Jason more than ever. But now, standing there, Jason wasn't just Frank's confidant anymore. He was tasked with honoring his friend's final wishes, something that felt both incredibly daunting and deeply important. Frank wanted this to be a celebration. Jason murmured to himself, his voice catching in the cool breeze. He turned to Mike Wolf, who stood beside him, quiet and contemplative. The tension between the two had been palpable in the past, but in these final moments of Frank's life, they'd come together. Frank had died peacefully, with Mike right there, holding his hand, and Jason knew how much that had meant to his friend. Their complicated friendship had defined American Pickers, but in the end, it was clear how much they still cared for each other. The funeral would be big. Frank had made sure of that. Despite his humble demeanor, he had wanted the service to reflect the scope of his life and the impact he'd had on the world. Jason had spent the last few weeks planning, juggling the influx of tributes and messages from fans, friends, and fellow antique enthusiasts who wanted to pay their respects. Frank was a storyteller, you know, Jason said, turning to Mike. This funeral, it's gotta be more than just people standing around in black suits. He wanted people to talk about the adventures, the good times, the things that made him tick. We're gonna have people bring in their own picks, things they found on the road that remind them of Frank. Mike nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He'd love that. He always wanted to know where things came from, the history. It wasn't just about the money for him. It was about the stories. The centerpiece of the funeral would be a massive display of some of Frank's most cherished finds, items that had meant the world to him. From vintage motorcycles to antique toys, each item had a story attached to it, a moment frozen in time that Frank had uncovered during his years on the road. But it wasn't just about his own collection. The funeral would invite fans and friends to bring their own pieces, creating a living, breathing tribute to the world of antiques that Frank had dedicated his life to. We're gonna have a section of the service where people can share their stories about Frank, Jason explained. Not just celebrities or people who worked on the show, but regular folks who met him at flea markets or auctions. People whose lives he touched in small ways. Frank wasn't the type of guy who just signed autographs and moved on. He'd sit there and talk with you, ask about your life. He cared. Jason paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. People were starting to gather, some holding small items wrapped in cloth or tucked under their arms. Pics they wanted to share in Frank's honor. It was exactly the kind of turnout Frank would have loved. One man held a rusty old gas station sign, something Frank would have pounced on the moment he saw it. Another person had brought an antique bicycle, its weathered frame showing the scars of time, but still maintaining its dignity, much like Frank himself. The atmosphere was one of reverence, but also a quiet joy. A recognition that Frank's legacy would live on in the stories and objects he'd spent his life uncovering.